Hello my bookish lovelies, Kira here, and today I'm going to be talking about the book to TV show adaptation of Cursed. I also like to make sure I throw in that there is a trigger warning for mentions of stillbirth. Cursed was originally marketed as being a gender bend on the original Arthurian retelling, where you have Nimue who becomes queen instead of Arthur who becomes king. But I have to say that this was actually a lot more than just that. Aside from our key players such as Merlin, Morgana, Arthur, and Nimue, we really didn't have a lot that were in common between this and the original Arthurian retellings. Really, a lot of this was Nimue, who is a fae, who was trying to fight to make sure her people do not go extinct. She, being a fae, is trying to make sure that she protects her people. This retelling was extremely packed with fae lore. Nimue is actually the daughter of an archdruid and connected to what is known as the Hidden. The Hidden is having a deep connection with nature, which basically means that she can manipulate nature, she can actually commune with it, ask things to grow, commune with the wildlife. Nimue's clan was believed to have been descended from the sky, so her clan is known as the Sky People. Unfortunately though, her status does not allow her for acceptance. A lot of people in her community, especially in the fae community, do not like her. She is seen as being touched by dark magic because of something that happened to her when she was a young girl. When she was a young girl, she was actually clawed by a demon bear, and her scars never truly healed. Now, they don't really go into this in the TV series, but they do talk about this a little bit in the book, and they say that the reason why she is considered cursed is because her scars from the demon bear look like they never actually healed. They look pretty fresh still. Now, when we get to the TV series, they don't really talk a lot about her being the one that's cursed. They actually seem to put more emphasis on the sword being cursed. Now, Nimue is only 16 years old, and her mother, who is the healer for her village, is pushing for her to walk in her footsteps. Summoners are always the ones that call upon the Hidden, and Nimue obviously has a natural talent for that. Nimue doesn't want it, and because Nimue is considered cursed in her village, the elders don't want her to have it either. So there's kind of a big controversy about that. Overall, the book is packed with immense detail, and it's actually what drew me to the book originally. I really liked where it started. I got really drawn in at the beginning. I was very intrigued by everything that was going on. At the very beginning, you do meet the Red Paladins, who are going from Fae Village to Fae Village, destroying the Fae lifestyle, the Fae way of living, in order to make way for their religion, because they regard the old religion that the Fae follow to be a heretic to the new religion, which is the one the Red Paladins follow. The Red Paladins really are the bad guys in this overall. They're the main ones that are prosecuting the Fae. They're going from village to village, burning everything the Fae have created down, murdering the Fae, doesn't matter, men, women, children, they do not discriminate. Overall, the book is pretty steady and it is pretty immersive. Now, another thing too is, and this is not a spoiler because this is actually mentioned in the trailer for the TV series, and it is mentioned pretty early on in the book as well, is that Merlin has lost his ability to do magic, but this is not something that he really wants people to know. He has to maintain his seniority among very powerful men, and the only way he's going to do that is to appear useful to them. Another thing they actually don't talk about in the TV series that they only discuss in the book is that Merlin is actually 800 years old. He has been around for a very long time, and they don't talk about how old he is in the TV series, not really. They only mention that he is very old, but they actually give it a number in the book. Another thing too is that they never actually refer to the sword as Excalibur in the book. They always discuss it as being the Devil's Tooth. Now, the sword has immense power, and the sword actually gives you kind of a thirst for blood, which is another thing too that they don't really talk about much in the TV series. They kind of touch upon it. There is a few scenes where they show that it does give you voices in your head that kind of push you to do things, which is actually still something that happens in the book, but they only vaguely touch upon it. They don't really actually discuss it, and they don't emphasize it. That is actually a point that was emphasized throughout the book. It's actually kind of funny that the book title is called Cursed when it's actually used two different ways. In the book, Nimue is kind of the one that's emphasized, that's the one that's cursed because of her scars not healing all the way. In the TV series, you touch more upon that with the sword than you do with her. For me personally, the major appeal of the book itself was how steady everything was. I loved how macabre some of the details were and how dark and weird they were, because there was a lot of novelty in this, but there was also a lot of things that just kind of felt overall mediocre. I think what I really struggled with is that this entire book, and the series felt no different, was that both of them felt like it was taking so long to set everything up. This entire book felt like it was just them setting up the world, the political alliances, how everything was going to go, the background. I mean, it pretty much basically did some character building, but it didn't really feel like a complete book. And actually this book felt like a beginning of a series, which is the same way it felt in the TV series. It was kind of disappointing too, and the reason like why I say like that it feels like a first one is because you don't really get to meet all the key players in the Arthurian retelling of King Arthur in this book until some of them towards the end of the book. And I feel like if you're just meeting those characters, what would be the point of introducing those characters if you were not planning on bringing them in to have a bigger role later on? The story, just like the TV series, did not feel finished. It did not feel completely fleshed out. I struggled a lot, especially like right after the introduction. Like I pretty much struggled with the rest of the book because it never felt like it got stronger. It never felt like it got more intense. Even with the twists that it threw in here, and those twists were what kept me wanting to read it, but overall, like, it just felt so mediocre. I felt like Nimoy's ability to wield the hidden was underutilized in both the book and the TV series. This is a girl who at the beginning of the book felt very powerful, very prominent in her power. She just wasn't really familiar with how to control it. And what I would have really liked to have seen in both this and the TV series is her working with the hidden more and her learning better how to control it. Now they do kind of touch upon in the TV series that she does learn a little bit more about how to control it, but you don't really get like a lot of that. And I feel like that's probably like one of the things that made this so mediocre is because we really don't get a lot of character development from Nimue herself. Like she gets a little bit further from like where she is, but there's nothing significant about her from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. And I felt that way about a lot of the characters, is that they didn't really feel like there was a lot of character growth. Another thing too, especially regarding the TV series, I don't feel that they really showed the impact in the TV series and how badly the sword was affecting her and making her crave battle and war. They kind of touched upon it a little bit in the TV series, but it wasn't a super emphasized characteristic like it was in the book. They actually went to the trouble in the book like to make sure that you knew that that sword had a lot more hold on her than you would have suspected in the TV series. Another thing too that really made this feel mediocre and made the TV series feel mediocre, it never actually felt like the overall plot got any stronger either. Once again, like this felt like it was the first in a book. Like it felt like it was all set up. It felt like I was kind of learning about the characters and the political alliances. It didn't really feel like the plot actually got any stronger, and I feel like that was the same way because actually this book to TV series adaptation was almost identical in a lot of different aspects, but both of them felt extremely mediocre. Now I'm going to talk about a few differences that I noticed between what's in the book to what is in the TV series as far as what they did to kind of flesh out things a little bit more. Now the TV series, they didn't touch upon like a lot of, I feel like a lot more important details, but they did flesh out the characters a little bit more. They gave them more background story. You got more interaction with them than you did in the book. This book, I don't feel like had enough information to cover 10 episodes an hour long each, which is what the TV series is. So one of the differences is they gave Pym a little bit more of a role in this. They kind of touch upon her like in the book, but they don't really give her much of a background story. Like they don't have like a ton like that's from her perspective. I feel like you got like a lot more fleshed out information in the TV series than you did in the book. Also in the book, Arthur's father is actually deceased. There was this whole episode like early on in the TV series, this is not a spoiler because it happens so early on in the TV series, where he actually steals the sword for honor to prove to his father that he is worthy. In the book, Arthur's father is dead. That never happened. Also, Arthur's sister Morgana is not a nun. She never was a nun. That was completely added in, I guess, because they wanted to introduce us to Iris, who in the TV series was out to kill Nimue because she is the wolf blood witch and she just felt like she was a heretic. Iris was also trying to prove herself in the TV series and become a red paladin. But it's funny because in the book, she was always a red paladin. She always worked for the red paladins. That never changed. It's kind of an interesting thing because it was like they wanted you to see Iris become more and grow into that role. But in the book, it's like they didn't have time to flesh that out. She was already a red paladin from the get-go. She was one of their assassins, and she was actually in competition with the Weeping Monk. Now, one of the things like that, one of the major things that ended up bothering me in the book to TV series adaptation is when Nimue used the hidden, she got these like little red veins up on each side of her face, and depending on how hard she exerted herself would depend on how visible they became and how far they stretched along her face. That was very dramatic, and while it was definitely like a show, you know, like not tell kind of scenario thing that they kind of did like in the TV series to kind of emphasize her use of the hidden, it was kind of weird actually. Like I kind of felt like really like rubbed the wrong way by it. Like it just felt weird. So overall, I really had very mediocre feelings about all of it. I really like kind of like walked away like not feeling great about the whole experience. I mean, it's had a pretty strong start, but the fact that it never got stronger and there wasn't like a lot of character development, like the characters felt really stagnant. I really struggled with this. And I originally rated the book a 3 out of 5 stars, but the longer it sits with me, like I feel like my rating is like slowly dropping. And I kind of feel like that way about the TV series. Now, I did mention, of course, before that this and the TV series felt like the start of something more, like they both felt like they were setting up everything. And actually episode 10 of the series gave me a little smidgen of hope that this could actually get better, because I felt like episode 10 was the strongest episode in the entire season 1, because it really kind of started to show you more of the characters. Like it kind of showed you like more of their power. They didn't feel like they were holding back in episode 10. And I don't know, like I almost would consider watching season 2 just to see if it got any better, because like I feel like this had so much potential, and it was potential that it never got to. And it was really just disappointing for me, because I was hoping like that it would be so much more than what it was. And it just, I was not happy with this at all. Like I think I ended up rating the series itself like a C, and that was being kind, because the acting wasn't great. The cinematography was okay. Like there was a few scenes like that were really like on a larger scale, like that were really interesting in the TV series. There was a few good things. I pretty much felt like my feelings of the book were pretty much on point with my feelings about the TV series, and they aligned almost exactly. And I feel like a 3 out of 5 stars is pretty equivalent to a C rating for the TV series. But also the longer I sit with the TV series, like the more I'm just really disappointed, because this is a series like that has been hyped up for months now. And the main reason I bought the book was so that I could talk about it, you know, like as far as like being the TV to film adaptation, and I feel like it was a major letdown on so many levels. Now we're at the end of the spoiler-free area. If you guys do not want to listen to the spoilers, do not continue past this point. Remember guys, like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. On to the spoilers. Hello! Alright, so if you guys stayed around for this, you guys are actually interested in the spoilers. We actually like learned in both the book and the TV adaptation that Merlin is Nimue's father. And I kind of feel like that was just a little bit awkward, but it also seemed very convenient. Now it kind of makes sense like overall, like with her connection to the hidden, that she would have Merlin as a father, because Merlin was notoriously like this really powerful wizard, even though he's not currently. But the fact that she's got like such a close connection to the hidden, which also makes her a very magical fae, which is more magical than the average fae, I mean, that kind of does make a little bit of sense. Now, what kind of was really crazy about this, and they actually like they alluded to this very early on in the TV series, and what was really interesting is the sword's origin wasn't really discussed until much later on in the book, but they alluded to it very early on in the TV series, and that is actually how Nimue's mother and Merlin met. Originally, the sword was actually inside of Merlin. It made him powerful, but it was causing him a lot of pain, and it could have killed him. And so Nimue's mother finds him injured inside one of their caves and decides to remove it. This was very kind of detrimental to Merlin, because it actually seems like the sword is the root of Merlin's power, which is actually very much emphasized in episode 10 of the TV series, because once Merlin gets a hold of the sword again, it's like he has all of his power back and he is back in his full prime. It was almost like without the sword, he was not very powerful. This actually kind of also rubbed me the wrong way, because Merlin has lived for 800 years. and he was one of the most powerful wizards, notoriously powerful wizards, in pretty much the entire land. And yet, when Nimue had the sword, even with all her connections to the hidden, she still was not very powerful, which also felt very, very awkward in the greater scheme of things. And I don't understand why she wasn't more powerful, or why, like, you know, like the sword didn't give her more power aside from giving her extra strength and extra fighting ability when she was wielding the sword. So a lot of things about this just don't really add up. Now we could, of course, you know, like second guess ourselves and say, oh, well, maybe it's because she didn't know how to wield it, just like she didn't know how to wield the hidden. But wouldn't you think like that if the sword was like really taking over like her, you know, like her ability to do things like that, like she would actually be able to have better control over it, she'd actually be able to do more things, and it never happened. So it was like weird because they also said the sword picked her, and it didn't really pick her because Merlin was still more powerful with a sword than she was. It just doesn't add up, folks. It just doesn't add up. Now, that's pretty much like the major spoilers. Like, there really wasn't a ton of spoilers like over like the greater scheme of things because they didn't like really leave a ton to the imagination. I guess like one of the other spoilers is that King Uther isn't actually a king. His mother had a stillbirth. He feared that the king would kind of excommunicate her or she'd lose her power, her station. He actually murdered a peasant girl and took that baby and raised it as her own, who is now King Uther Pendragon presently. Now, that was kind of an interesting character arc. I actually really liked that twist because it kind of made him illegitimate, and it kind of almost solidified Nimue's place as being queen because the sword had picked her, supposedly, which I'm still not convinced about that either because, you know, reasons just discussed, but it just was kind of like one of the better, I feel like, twists on the whole kind of conversation. It's just overall, like, this series was a big letdown. I can't like really stress that enough about how much of a letdown it was. So that's pretty much the extent of this review for the book to TV series adaptation. I hope you guys liked my thoughts. If you guys like my thoughts, please hit the subscribe, hit like. It really helps me out. Comment below. We can talk about this. If you guys are going to put spoilers like in the comments, like though, try like to drop it down like a way so like that people who have not yet watched the series and kind of still want to. I mean, you know, I understand why you'd want to. Like, I mean, curiosity. Pretty much it. If you guys are interested in liking and subscribing, I'd really appreciate it. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, Amazon, and Goodreads. Those links are linked in the description below, and I will see you guys again very soon.